No, I have a feeling that once I randomly say something out of, because sometimes my mouth works faster than my brain does, that will end up down a rabbit hole that I didn't intend anyhow. So,
Well, that's the whole point. Welcome to the GMs Corner, the Brewster Baseball Association podcast where we put general managers on the hot seat and try to steal all of their secrets so that I can win more often. I am Ron Collins, the general manager of the Yellow Springs 9, and I give my guest today 5 stars. That's right, gentlemen. I am sitting down with shoeless Doug Olmsted, GM of the California Crusaders. Welcome, Doug. Thank you so much for taking your time here today. I'm extremely glad to have the opportunity to finally get you in the GM's Corner.
well, I'm very humbled to be here just because I probably have absolutely nothing valuable for anyone else, but I think I'm going to have fun, and I hope you do too, Ron.
Well, I'm certain that I will have fun, and I think that the fact that you think that you have nothing of value to provide means that you'll be one of the best guests of all time, just like all of the other guests are some of the best guests of all time.
Of course, of course. I'll be right up there with all of them.
Well, let me start off, maybe give you a bit of an introduction to the league, some of the folks who are new in the league, etc. You came in on the coattails of Ted Schmidt and maybe talk for a little bit about, I don't know, how did you find Out of the Park and the Brewster, and what's your overall history with the game?
Sure. So when it came to Out of the Park baseball, I'd actually seen it on Steam for several years, to be honest, and I kept having it pop up because it was similar to games that I'd played. But every time I'd even take a look at it, I thought, man, that game is way too nerdy for me. Too many spreadsheets. I love baseball, but man, I just don't think I can do it. And finally, beginning of actually OTP 20, the second or first day it came out, I just thought, what the heck? I was bored. I ended up buying it, and I fell in love with it. So really, my time frame with OOTP is really just one real world year, which is minuscule compared to many people in this league, which is probably why I feel so, like I said, I'm humbled to be on here because I just feel my one real world year in OOTP just doesn't stack up. But then
well, you've got quite a background in baseball as it is, though, right? I mean, you're not a neophyte baseball person at all, right?
All right. I mean, I grew up. My dad was a baseball coach growing up. I played baseball the way up through college. I really never gave it up because I played a little bit amateur ball and then, fell into the stupid softball, beer league softball, which was just not as fun because it just didn't bring the competitiveness that I liked. But then I ended up having kids of my own and ended up coaching them, and I've been coaching for the last about 15 years. I guess I coached a little before I coached my own kids. So I've been coaching myself baseball. Baseball's just in my blood. It was always in my blood. So
when you were playing, what position were you playing?
I played mostly on the left side of the infield. So I played a lot of third. In college, I played short, and then I pitched. So those were I kind of wish I would have played outfield sometimes just because I think maybe I could have gone farther. Maybe that's just me wishful thinking, but I was a decent fielder, but I just felt like, I could have maybe focused more on hitting if I would have played in the outfield, but yeah. Whatever.
But the infield is where it's at. I was a second baseman, shortstop all the way through high school.
Nice.
And a little bit into amateur college stuff, but I didn't go nearly as far as you went. And definitely infielders are where all the intelligent people are at.
Oh, of course. I can only imagine what our signs back and forth would have been at short and second between you and I. Who's going to cover the bag and all that good stuff. Would have been great.
There you go. And then 16 other signs just to basically blow shit.
Oh, of course, just in case if there was a Ron Collins in the other dugout that was keeping track of all our signs, we'd want to mess them up.
There you go, and pounding on the garbage cans and all that other good stuff.
Absolutely.
Now, how old are your kids? You say you're coaching them. What leagues are you coaching them in?
So my oldest is a 15-year-old, and then I have another 12-year-old son who's going to be 13, and then I have an 8-year-old daughter. So I've been coaching. I was coaching actually Babe Ruth baseball before I was able to coach my oldest son. And then when he got to be, old enough where I could coach his teams, I basically coached every single team he had up until 2 years ago when they moved to hired coaches. And then, of course, I moved on to my middle son. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, but we're the nerds. We do all the travel baseball stuff. So we travel not only in North Dakota, but all over, at least the upper Midwest. And
that's got to be a lot of time. What do you do? How do you work that into your work life and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I've been blessed, with how that's all kind of managed with the jobs I've had, to take time off. And really, for me, that, and thankfully with my wife too, we've kind of made it where baseball and the travel has become kind of our vacation and most of our social life. Because in North Dakota, you really have 3 months of weather where you can go pretty hardcore with baseball, and we make the most of it. But with my jobs and such, I've just been able to use my vacation time, work well with my upper level management people, just to make sure I get my work done, and they let me go. So it's been good.
That's cool.
Practice is the toughest, just because I like to have practice, during the afternoon hours, and you'd have to leave work quite often, but it's always worked out.
But it's a big deal for your kids too. I'm sure you know that since your dad was with you. My dad was a coach for me through Little League, and some of my very most vivid memories as a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid is my dad doing things with the team and doing things with me, and just that whole feeling is. I admire what you're doing there. I think that's fantastic with you and your kids that way.
Yeah, it's actually been a great experience. I mean, there's some times where I think my kids, and even I feel like, man, it'd be great if I could, have another dad take over and do this. And I've been able to do that on occasion just because of how things have worked out. But mostly I think it's because my boys, they know that they have to earn everything they get to play. I'm not one where just because you're my kid, you're going to play short and bat third. Most of the time, I think I make it harder on them. I put them in positions that are probably not what they deserve, just because I don't want to be that coach, that dad coach who favors their kid. So
yes, I completely get that. One of my fondest, I don't know whether this is a good fond memory or not. I was actually in Little League throwing a no-hitter for 3 innings, and my dad pulled me because he said, we have a rule in our team that you never pitch more than 3 innings. I'm going, Dad, I got a no-hitter. He says, no, we're not going to, he actually took me behind the dugout and says, I am not going to do something special for you.
Yeah, but that's not how baseball works.
No,
I would agree with your dad, man. That's exactly right.
I do too. Looking back on it, I agree with him, but at the time I was not a very happy camper.
Well, that's nice to hear, because I know there's a lot of times my boys have not been happy campers with how I've treated them. So, but
there you go.
It's got to be fair. It's got to be right.
Let me turn the corner just a little bit between sports and family time and so forth. You are like the league's poet laureate. Tell me about that. How did you get into your form of writing, and just why did it come about?
It's actually, I think it's kind of hilarious that's how you present it, only because actually through high school and into college, I never wrote anything. I actually hardly read anything, to be honest with you. It was just I just had no interest. It wasn't even on my radar to write. I ended up landing a job at the sports desk at our local paper, the Bismarck Tribune. And just because they knew me from playing, I guess, I got the job there. And then one of the guys, his name is Scooter Pursley, which means nothing to anybody but me. He must have saw something or liked me, and we had the state A basketball tournament in town, which is our top level basketball in North Dakota. And he had me cover. He just said, "Hey, Doug, you're going to go cover these games, or the consolation bracket games. So they're not as big of a deal, but I'm going to have you go and cover these, and you need to write a story." And I was just like, I skimped by all the way through in English classes and everything. And I went there, and it actually was kind of fun. And then he had me keep writing, and I ended up getting an internship at the paper there and wrote a lot for the sports and the business sections, and ended up going to a different college the next year and decided to take some creative writing courses. And it's just kind of fell from there, where I just kind of like, and actually, like Schroeder always says, like the very shoeless hashtag. It's actually just kind of fun for me, and that's what I've always decided. Like, I like writing things that are, I don't know, different, I guess, and it kind of goes from there. And the poetry thing, where I started that with, in the Brewster, actually was a kind of a time where I was. Well, how about I'll reverse a little bit. When you said I took over for Ted Schmidt, the legendary Ted, and
the legendary Ted Schmidt.
Yeah. And it was kind of actually, because when I joined the league, obviously I was really new to OOTP. I'd really only been playing it for about 3 months. I loved it, and I had actually never played an online version of any game before. And I was I think I even posted on like Reddit that I was getting bored with playing solo games. I wanted more of a challenge. Like, I like games that beat the crap out of me, and OOTP just wasn't as challenging on solo level. Not that I'm a baseball solo god or anything, but it was just, I wanted like a challenge where I'd get chewed up. And so anyway, when I joined the Brewster, and realizing how amazing some of the guys here, like yourself and Matt, who are, they're beta testers, and reading, Ted's things and some of the other guys, I was just kind of blown away that, what was happening. And here I was a part of it. And it just felt really odd to me that, I felt like I had suckered you guys, or, tricked you guys into letting me in the league, to be honest. But, honestly, when I came in and I followed Ted's, he had his, how to keep like his, I'm forgetting it now, but the sustainable winning is, I think, what it was, that whole thing. And I was just following that, and I was kind of eating it all up, because I was just my personality is I just want to learn and learn and learn. And I get a little OCD with trying to figure stuff out.
Oh, sure.
Not nearly with the spreadsheets and stuff, but just trying to understand like how to best play the game. And so I followed his, and all of a sudden, with everything went down, and all of a sudden Matt was, asking me if I was ready to be a GM and for California. And I felt really odd, when I did that, especially taking over for Ted, because I felt like, here you have a guy who's a tremendous GM. He's built this amazing team. Even with my lack of experience in the game, I could tell, like, financially it was set up, beautifully for me. They had it was set up the way the team was set up, the way the ballpark was set up. It just felt.
Yeah, you can get a real feel for the way a baseball GM person here in OOTP thinks merely by taking a scan of their finances and a scan of their minors. And Ted obviously was, and still is. Ted will always be a remarkable individual when it comes to how to implement his vision of what he's trying to accomplish, right?
Yeah.
Before it's all said and done.
Yeah, absolutely. It all felt really clean, coming in. The organization felt, I'm using the word clean in my own term probably, but just it all felt like you said, there was a reason behind everything he did. There was a reason why the team was successful like it was, and both financially and, how it played on the field. And I just felt awkward taking over the team, and knowing my personality was nothing at all like Ted's, which is probably what was more of obviously was just a problem for me more than anyone else.
Well, I think one of the great things about this league is that there are so many personalities, and every personality has a different frame of reference. And so from the outside looking in, it seemed to me like your big challenge was, how do you get comfortable within the confines of the Crusaders as they are defined now, and how do you make them become yours, right, over time?
Yeah, that's 100% true, because I think when I jumped in, the big thing was with the contracts for Gracia and Ramos, and I wanted to get that out of the way, even if I screwed it up, as quickly as possible. And like I said, I'm probably reading more into it than there was with that, but I felt like those two things were just a huge sticking point. If I just didn't deal with them, I'd be sitting there having that kind of being analyzed for a long time. So
Yeah.
I
No, I
sure
think
wish
you're
I.
bang on there. I think that was the ultimate question that Ted was probably facing in his own mind is um, it's time it was time to make a decision. You either needed to commit down that path or blow it up and go a different path, right? And what I saw you do is you looked at it and said, I'm going to commit down this path to these pitchers and we'll find out what happens. That was a high risk time period in my mind because if those pitchers had not aged well, you were hosed.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Especially with Gracia, because he was definitely older than Ramos was. Actually, now looking back with how good he's pitched, I feel like his contract was, I don't want to call it a steal because it was still in that 14-15 million dollar per year range, but
Hmm.
he's pitched fantastic. So which I originally was kind of sick about, feeling that, oh man, I should have traded him, or I should have given him a smaller contract or a team option sooner, or even a player option. But looking back, I'm sure glad the Ramos contract is one that probably I obviously I think that's a big mistake. I think it's pretty clear it was just too much money for him, even though he's solid. It kind of it kind of binds me a little bit more than I wanted to be, but
Yeah.
that's okay. I mean, I made the decision. I'm living with it. I've been able to deal with it and still be somewhat successful. So
Yeah,
it's been
and I
okay.
think that's one of the main things that you see in anyone who stays around for more than a season or two here, right? Is you can make a mistake and you learn from the mistake. In the Ramos case, it's not really totally a mistake, it's just something you have to deal with and you're figuring
Yeah,
out how to deal with it, right?
yeah.
Before
And
that's
as
all
long as
said
he,
and done.
yeah, and as long as he continues to contribute, even decently, I'm fine. I still have, I think, 2 or 3 more, I think 3 more years with him to make sure he contributes. But even if I have to throw him in the bullpen, he'll be a fantastic, bullpen arm. So
Yeah.
it'll be fine.
He'll be a
It's
very
just
expensive bolt
yeah.
arm.
But I did it. I don't regret it, and I actually like, even coming in with Ted's franchise, it was or even with California in particular, they have a lot of guys that played for California for a long time, and I really like that portion.
Oh yeah.
You know, I know I've written about it or even talked about it, I think, on my own podcast, just about like Dale Murphy, and seeing him in a Philadelphia Phillies uniform kind of killed me as a boy, and it kind of pulled back the curtain on the Wizard of Oz and made things not as magical. So
Yeah.
um,
The modern day world of free agency is obviously much nicer for the players and the especially the guys who actually make a career. They don't get screwed as much as they used to when I was a kid. But I
yep,
will admit that it was nice as a 8, 9, 10, 12-year-old kid to basically know who all the guys were going to be on your team all the time.
yeah, and we're seeing that right now with Omaha with Justin and Morales. Like, I
Yeah,
love that he wants to keep him, and he's obviously he knows he's gonna overpay for what he's gonna be in the next several years, but
of
he
course.
just wants that storyline, that continuity, and I think that's what makes the BBA special compared to, I really can't even say compared to a lot of other leagues, because I really haven't been a part of more other leagues for very long at all either. But I just think that's what's neat, is you have that long time storyline. And for me, Gracia is one. I'm sure I'm going to overpay him because he's going to retire as a Crusader. I say that now anyway, but I
Yeah,
can't imagine having him go somewhere else. So I'll
yeah.
figure out a way to make it work with him
I
too.
think that having been in several on leagues, the idea that a general manager becomes loyal to their players. In any good league, you have at least some numbers of GMs who are kind of like that before it's all said and done. I think the thing that really makes this league different to me in that sense is um, is related to the writing aspect of it. Because when you're writing about your players, you get closer to them, and um, the the mere the flavor of loyalty here is very different than most of the other leagues that I've been in that sense. Just kind of riffing off of your thoughts there. Do you feel like California is yours now? Do you
Yeah, I
feel like
do
you've got the
actually.
Sheila stamp on them?
Yeah, and it's funny because, where I was going with my long story about Ted and all that, it was actually, I kind of wasn't having fun because I was trying to be Ted's California Crusaders, and I'll be honest with you, if it wasn't, if it wasn't for Vic, and Vic in Chicago, I probably wouldn't be in the league anymore. Vic kind of talked me through some things about, and I I hate to speak for Vic and I hate to comment on some of our conversations, but he came in also after a GM, a longtime GM
Yes,
had,
he did.
and so he went through a lot of the very, very similar things that I did. And it is tougher, I think, and it's silly because it's fake baseball, but it's just tougher coming in after a guy who's kind of a longtime GM, like you were just saying, these guys that have a lot of ownership to their team and to the league, and then they kind of leave in not the greatest of terms, and you're just a newbie jumping in. And Vic kind of talked me through about just let's just have fun, like let's enjoy this. It's supposed to be fun. And really, when he talked me through that, and we kind of, you can definitely see it from Vic's writing, is just, I love it. I mean, I think him and his participation, and I think it just adds so much to the league, and to me personally, it just adds so much to my enjoyment of the league. And seeing that, and not just Vic. I mean, there's other guys, you in particular too, that I just enjoy how you immerse yourself and build the world around us. But going through that and having him just say, Doug, just have fun, be yourself. That's where that, the David Simpson's horrible poetry came about. Because I just wanted to, actually, that started because it was a point where I'm like, what would be the exact opposite thing that Ted would do? And I don't know Ted. I mean, I've never really spoken to him. Personally, I just read what I was just like, what would he definitely not do? And I'm like, poetry. And I'm not really, I've never really wrote poetry before, ever. And I just thought, God, this would be, I just think it's fun, It's actually like sometimes I write and I'm like, oh my God, that's so stupid. And I think, it's going to be so great in here though. And I just write it down. But that's what made it fun for me. And then thinking about how I have this fantastic baseball player in our league, David Simpson, who, I'm just going to toot his horn here. He's having a fantastic start to the season, which is kind of carrying us right now, which is great to see. But having this guy who's a legend right now in the league anyway, having him write poetry, just it makes me giggle inside, and it's made it a lot of fun. So that's why kind of where that started. So. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Well, you mentioned David Simpson and starting off with a solid year so far. What do you see? How do you see California working out this year? What are your plans? Are things? Where do you see your holes? Are you expecting to be able to prevail again in the weaker Pacific Division, or how's that for a leading question?
I'm just gonna pretend I didn't hear that last part. No, I think for me, and it's really no secret, it all starts with my starting pitching. I'm lucky enough to have remnants of the guys that Ted brought in. Still having Gracia Ramos, like I mentioned. Cisco Morales has been fantastic. And he was actually, I thought, always good, but he was just extremely undervalued because of the way the ballpark was set up, being a righty and having it just so lefty heavy, or just the ballpark set up for lefty hitters. I knew Morales was probably better than he was. And once I changed the ballpark around, he's, I think he's living up to just being that solid number 3 starter, which he is. And then having Danny Garcia ready to go and him up, I'm just excited about him. And then I kind of throw in Nick Pierce, who I just like because he's a big ground baller, and I can throw it in infield that, can go and get it. So it's all about my starters. My lineup, I think, is fine. It's solid. I lack a lot of power, but it's the kind of team I like to run. I like a lot of action on the field. Mm-hmm. I don't always care if it's home runs. I like guys running around the bases, and that's kind of how I built my team. But truly, my hole is my bullpen, and I'm just, every time I look at it, it kind of just, I got a bunch of guys that just have these, these rubber arms I'm just throwing out there. I'm just hoping, and even this year, the games I've lost have mostly been because of the bullpen arms. So that's just my huge hole, and I have tried to, last draft specifically, I tried to focus hard on getting some of those, bullpen arms that can work their way up and be some gems for me. But I'm really just lacking there outside of Vitali. I'm hurting. So, but so that I think is going to hurt me again in the playoffs. I hope I don't not just I hope I make the playoffs for one, but I hope I just make it into the second round this year, because it's been 3 years of getting scooted out after that first round. So
Oh,
it's not
believe me,
been
it's
fun.
far less painful to go the first round and just have it done with.
No way. Come on. It's just a terrible story when you just, your story at least is fun now, and it's
That is,
enjoyable, and
it's enjoyable
it
for at least 31 GMs.
oh, of course, but it adds so much. It just adds so much to the world of our league, and you're gonna win one. It's fairly obvious you're gonna win one, but yeah, I just want to get past that first round. That's my goal this year. So I just don't think I have the bullpen depth to go much farther than that.
So you talked about kind of your team is speed and movement and balls in play and so forth. What do you've got Gracia and Morales are getting on the older side. You already talked about Ramos is kind of on the edge of needing to go into the pen. As you look forward into what California is going to look like in 2045 and 6 and so forth, um, what are your thoughts? Are you even thinking that far out?
Yeah, I am. I've been looking and kind of sweating it out a little bit, because I need to milk these starters for as long as they can go right now. Because just like everyone else, it's just a pitcher poor league right now, and there's not a ton coming up through the works. So it's not like you can put a package together and get a good arm working up the ranks. But I really am looking for, I just want consistency out of my starters, and I think that's what's going to become really valuable in the next, once this, there's going to be good guys like Wolin Weber and those guys that are just fantastic, but you just need guys that are going to get out there and not lose games for you. And that's kind of what I'm trying to find right now, because, and I think with that, I just, it's like we talked about. I like guys that can move the ball around when they're hitting, and I like gap hitters, and I like guys. I don't like, I think part of it for me is you can look at a lot of my philosophy by who I want as who I put as catcher the last couple of years, because I traded you for Saito, and he's not the greatest on base guy, but he's a good hitter. Like he should hit close to 290, I would say 295, with an on base percentage around 320, 330. But I chose him over like Hetty Wiedemann and Chip Saunders, who probably are going to hit, like Hetty would hit probably around, 220, 230 and have that same 330, 340 on base percentage. And I just think it's so much more valuable to have guys that are going to get base hits or get, hit doubles if our on base percentage is within 15, 20 points of each other. I'd rather have a guy, with 70 points higher on their batting average.
Sure.
So that's kind of what I'm going, and it's no joke when I said, like in some of my team news, that I just want to have a team that kind of constantly is putting pressure on your team, and I don't want to have holes anywhere. Like I want guys that have speed. I want guys that are going to get on base. I want the defense to constantly feel pressure, and that's the kind of team I'm trying to build.
Yeah, without any doubt. And I've put up a post a time or two on that kind of a team, that steady pressure, on base movement team. If you get a team that's filled with guys who just find ways to get on base, you score a lot of runs just by rote. Right?
Right, exactly. Once you get a guy to second, anything can happen. So.
And Saito in particular I like paying attention to him because he fits the mold of catchers that I like, and that he can contribute offensively. And one of the things that I notice about your teams is they're also defensively minded, right? Saito's going to grow into be one of the better catchers in the league defensively. He's just young right now. But you look at his ratings, ability and arm rating, and his overall growth path, he's probably going to wind up being an 8 or 9 overall ranking of catcher, which those things don't actually make any difference, but they're interesting, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And actually, he's been a pleasant surprise. Even like the Zimmer he won last year was a really pleasant surprise for him. But again, it just goes back. Like, I don't want to lose games for certain reasons. You know what I mean? I don't want to. I don't want to give up anything, which is why I like these guys that have some defensive minded to them. Which,
so
if
is the
there's one
defensive part actually in your mindset? Is that
oh yeah, absolutely
by design rather than by happenstance?
No, it's 100%. I mean, I'm not to the point where I would give up a ton of offense for a defensive guy, but when you have like David Simpson, for instance, I'll just use him as an example. The reason why I've kind of floated him out there as trade bait and all that is I either need to decide that he's going to be my DH, which I did have him kind of playing there a lot this year. The reason I moved him there is I just don't like having mediocre fielders out there. I feel like I'm giving something up, like I'm allowing, just because of the lack of defensive athleticism, I'm giving up runs, I'm giving up hits here and there. I just don't like that. I'm going to beat you because I can beat you by, you are having to earn it. I don't mind losing if you earn it, but I don't like losing because my guy's a chump out there.
Well, there you go. Well, let me kind of bring this to a head, and I'm going to put you in this corner and shine the bright light on your eyes and give you this lightning round approach that I'm sure that you've heard some of the other lightning rounds. They're just really brisk and sharp and hard to deal with, and no meandering or anything. But let me start with saying favorite Crusader.
Well, it was Joe Lacey, but he's no longer with the Crusaders anymore. So probably my favorite Crusader right now. I still like Quaint Curris just because, or I don't know, the Greek Freak. I just like what he brings to the ballpark. It's fun. He's an exciting guy to watch. He's fun to have at the top of the order. And then right behind him is Gracia. How can I not say Gracia? So
we are in the middle of the 2042 draft. We've had a little bit of conversation on the Slack channel, but not everyone's on Slack. Talk to me about your draft approach and why do you do it that way?
Well, my draft approach is I hate to say that I'm a system guy because I really don't have a clear system. Well, I kind of have tried to probably talk a little about that today. I could probably just listen to this and I could probably hear my system. But I guess for me, the draft is a really fun and exciting time. It's one of my favorite parts of it, and I like to find guys that have an elite skill or something that's going to make them different and amazing down the road. It's tough for me just to get a guy where I'm going to be like, okay, he's going to be a number 4 or 5 starter, or hey, this guy's going to be a platoon bat here and there. He's going to contribute. I don't know. For me, I like to try to find somebody who's a little more exciting, which is why I'd probably drafted a couple awkward guys last year. But it's fun. It adds to the story of it.
So you're kind of a unique guy. You're looking for somebody who has something out off the beaten path.
Yeah, and obviously he's got to be athletic. I mean, that goes without saying. I want a guy who can play defense. I like guys who are a little quicker, but also just have something about them that's a little, different. And power's not a big thing for me, so sometimes you can find guys that have different, unique skill sets.
How do you manage your rotation? 7-day lineups and mix and match, or do you just kind of slot and dash?
I'd actually never even knew that the 7-day lineup tab was there until I took over the Crusaders, and Ted kind of left me a nice little, I hate to say tutorial, but just kind of a little tips. And he said to use the 7-day, and I started using them. And I absolutely love the 7-day lineups. It's actually, it's not really that frustrating, but when a guy, changes a pitcher out, and I can see that, oh, crap, he pitched this guy, so now I'm going to my default lineup, which is fine. But I just love, because when I go 7-day, I can say, okay, I'm going to give this guy playing time here. I'm going to put this guy in now because, I think he'll do better against this pitcher, or I have this pitcher throwing, so I want a better defense against this team. So I love being able to have that control. And then, when guys switch things up, and I'm sure everybody I play now is going to switch their pitching lineups up, so I'm totally screwed. But I don't know. That's part of the fun for me, is to make up those lineups, and I think that's just the coach in me.
How will you celebrate your first Landis?
I'm going to go buy 3 bottles of wine, for my wife to drink, and the people on Slack will probably understand that.
We'll just leave it lay right there. But I completely understand. Favorite strategy that nobody else knows about?
Favorite strategy? That's a good
This is the
question.
question. This is the final lightning round question,
Hmm.
and so it needs to be an extremely important strategy that no one else knows about and that I can edit out so that only I learn it.
Sure. So really, here's actually a question I was going to ask you. So I'll just go in, and it's not a strategy I have yet, but it goes. I think it's because I've lost 3 straight first round of playoffs, and I'm really trying to figure out. And it was actually something I asked Mike from Madison because he was doing, his things, and I'm just like, I want to know take my catchers thing again with like Hedy Veidman and Saito. How they might have the same on base percentage during the regular season, but I would just have to think that Saito is going to be better in the playoffs because you're going to face better pitching. You're going to facing better teams with better defense. Typically, you're going to face better teams, so you're not going to get those extra walks. You're not going to get those cheap little base hits as much. And I'm just thinking my strategy would be I want to build a team that's just good enough to get in the playoffs, but then is built to win in the playoffs. And I think I'm still trying to figure that out, Ron. So I really don't have a strategy. I just have an idea of where I want to go.
Well, I think that that sounds like a spectacularly good strategy before it's all said and done. Build a team that will win.
You're welcome, everyone. You're welcome.
You heard it here straight from Tulis's mouth. Build a team that will win, and things will go really well.
It's amazing.
I love that. I think that's fantastic. What I think what I react to the most there is that when you get to the playoffs, you're not playing a bunch of schlunky teams, right? Before it's all said and done. So, I think there's 2 different frames of thought. I mean, if you can, by all means, if you can load up on nothing but superstars, then obviously that's a big that's a great strategy, but I think the big question there is holes, right? If you have a big hole in I like your conversation about drafting people who have an elite skill set someplace, right? Something they can do really well, because over the season that may or may not be dominant in some place or another, but if you can get down to the point where you're in the playoffs with 1 or 2 games, or in a short series, if you can match up a strength against somebody else's weakness, then that's a pretty big deal. So in order to do that, you have to have some guys that have some elite strengths and some elite capabilities. And even more importantly, not have holes. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly right, because when you're in the playoffs, you might just be facing the top 3 starters from one of the top teams, and those 3 starters are all going to be quite good. And you can have guys that are, as far as I'm concerned, like 4 contact guys, even if they have strengths otherwise, they're just going to be that huge hole in that lineup. And, I think you could just get taken advantage of that way. But who am I to say? I haven't won anything yet.
Yeah, that's. I was just gonna. You're stealing my words. I'm pontificating like I know how to build a playoff team, and I don't have any Landises. So all I can say is that Tyler is wearing at least 2 of my Landis rings, and that's annoying.
So do the opposite of what Ron and I say, then you'll win everything.
Well, there you go. Well, you mentioned earlier's question to ask me. This is where I will traditionally just kind of turn the questioning over, and if you have anything you would like me to talk about or pretend like I know what I'm talking about, I'd be happy to do my best.
All right. Well, since I do have a question, I like the color. I'm not a huge, well, I pretend I'm not a huge stats guy and all that, but I really like the color. I like the story. I like the world building. So my question for you, Ron, is if you just take out every option that's part of like the game code, so anything outside of the game code about how OTP puts out the outcomes of pitches and plays and games and hitters, outside of all that, so outside of the actual baseball game, what do you feel could be added to the game that would increase like the immersion factor or the world building of the game itself?
Oh, Um, well, I'm gonna go. I'll go full bore on this and say nothing, because at the end of the day, there's enough here that if I turn all that off and I just go to my raw fiction writer's imagination and play the game of baseball and just, screw all these other questions, right? Before it's all said and done. This is brilliant. This is a fantastic game. It's got players with personalities and managers and coaches, and I guess if you wanted to, you could say, please add me in an umpire or two so I can bitch at them or something like that. But I can do that all on my own.
Right, right.
The game has so many weird esoteric plays built into it. So if you're scanning through game logs, you'll come across, I mean, uh, Chris's Edmonton won the Dank Landis on hidden ball trick. How can you get any more baseball than that, right? Before it's
Yep.
all said and done. Um, the thing that I love the most about this league, not OOTP, but the thing that I love the most about this league is that you can go back in history and see the way that all of the GMs, even those who don't write the most or the most prolifically or whatnot, they can bring their own flavor of what baseball means inside their head. I'd almost like, I mean, I love Face Gen and things like that. I don't need it. Um, I see everything inside my head, right? I mean, it's just the most. The game is set up to be brilliant from the GM's point of view and to allow you to bring your own imagination into everything about the aspect of what baseball is, right? And the stats lines are close enough to real life baseball. The things that happen make practical sense. The career paths that happen, some guys fall off at 27 and another guy goes to 32, and then you get Dusty Rhodes who may still be hitting 150 singles a year when he's 47. Who knows? Um, I mean, the game doesn't need anything else in it at all in order to be in order to just turn everything off and have great fun playing baseball, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Um,
I actually 100% agree. I really like your answer, and even harping back where you said even with Face Gen, like I agree. I think that's you can go through every BB or every GM in our league, and you can see how baseball plays out in their head. And you don't need that extra little extra, razzle dazzle to have those storylines. And it's just like anything else. The book's always better than the movie because you play that movie in your own head with the book, and that's what happens with BBA.
yeah, and I
And
just love
yeah,
the thing I put on for the 7 for 70s where I went back. I actually spent about a half a day going back and rereading all the posts from all the GMs that had come before me, and it was just a great deal of fun to see the differences in the way they went about things and in the way they brought their own imagination into this. I consider this world to be kind of like a comic book world, right?
sure.
Um, because the game isn't exactly like completely like real life, and the players don't always do the things that you'd think that a real life player ought to do, and you can get into finances and what they ask for and what they're not asking for, and who gets to sign Lucas McNeil for $1 million next year, and all this other good stuff. But if you make it a comic book world, you can just see everything play out in in ways that are just unpredictable and fun, and in ways that allow me to interact with you guys in such a way. You talk about solo play. I played solo for about 6 months or a year way back when I first found OOTP, and I just found it to be quaintly fun for the first about 3 months, and then it got dry and boring because, first off, I can beat the computer all the time, so it's not much fun. But then I found online leagues with people, and first off, it's very hard to beat people. It's pretty easy to beat the code. It's very, very hard
Yep.
to beat people. And then second off, even more important about this online league thing, and the Brewster has it a gazillion times over, is the personality of the GMs just come flying through because we are so passionate. The things that we struggle with sometimes are because we talk past each other, and we get angry sometimes because our plans didn't work out, and somebody else got a special deal, and but that's not true. We just think it in the time, because we're trying to win.
Right.
Anyway, that's my long-winded pontification on that.
Well, I actually love that the comic book, the comic book world, and we're kind of living in it, because in that aspect, and maybe to tie things up a little bit, coming in after Ted Schmidt, I think maybe with my idiotic type writing and my poetry, I might be the perfect type of GM to follow him in that comic book world. So in that aspect, I'm probably the right guy here, right time to take over the California Crusaders.
I think that is an absolutely perfect way to leave our way out of this. So I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Again sometime here. I need to get off my duff and do more of these. Thank you so much for your time here today, Doug, and good luck through 2042, and hope that we can meet in the Cartwright maybe.
Yeah, because then you'll know I'll lose. Thanks a lot, Ron. Thanks for having me.
Every fan base in the world is happy to see Yellow Springs on their playoff agenda.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
The Brewster Baseball Association is an out-of-the-park baseball league commissionered by Mr. America himself, Matt Rechtenwald, and competed in by an amazing group of outstanding general managers. Check us out at montybrewster.net. You have been listening to the GMs Corner, a podcast where we put BBA GMs on the hot seat. Music is Cool Piano by Tigerius and is used under Creative Commons Attribution License. See you next time. Until then, have fun, be safe, and always remember that even a boring team news is worth 2 points.